Ever scroll through job postings and there are some you just totally skip over? I'll be honest, COVID tester was that for me for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we got a hold of this RoleCatcher career guide, and wow,
Really changes your perspective, doesn't it?
it really does. Talk about hidden depths.
Absolutely.
So today's deep dive is all about COVID testers, what they really do, the skills you need, and why this might be a career path worth checking out.
It's way more than just swabs, let me tell you.
Okay, so let's jump right in. So from this RoleCatcher guide, what do they reveal about what COVID testers actually do? I think most of us have only a surface-level understanding of this role.
Right, it makes sense. Well, the guide really emphasizes how much of the job falls under customer and personal service, like a surprising amount, 82%.
Wow, 82%.
Yeah.
See, that's what I mean by hidden depths. I don't think customer service
Right.
when I picture medical testing.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's not just about, being friendly and smiling. Think about it. You're often dealing with people who are at a very stressful moment.
Oh, for sure.
They're anxious about the test itself, worried about what the results might mean, maybe even, skeptical about the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely.
The guide even uses this example of like a tester noticing a patient kind of hesitate. And instead of just pushing forward, they ask a few open-ended questions, which uncovers these deeper concerns, right? Maybe they're afraid to miss work. Maybe they're caring for someone who's really vulnerable at home.
That's a really good point.
And those conversations can really make or break the effectiveness of public health efforts, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's really interesting.
It's like they become like frontline public health workers in a way, not just technicians.
Exactly. They're gathering that crucial info, yes, but they're also educating the public, managing expectations, even like shaping perceptions of healthcare,
Wow.
all while keeping themselves and others safe.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So you're telling me this is a role that requires like serious people skills on top of the technical stuff.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I think this guide really drives home.
Okay.
It's about so much more than just like, do you have a medical background?
Okay, that's good news for some of us, I think,
Right.
including me.
Uh-huh.
So what are some of these skills that the guide really highlights as being like key, and how do those actually translate into this very specific job?
Well, they really emphasize three in particular. First up, and this one might seem kind of obvious,
Okay.
but it's active listening. But they break down what that actually means in this context.
I like that.
Right. It's not just, are you hearing the words someone is saying? It's about those nonverbal cues. It's knowing when to ask those clarifying questions.
Interesting.
And really ensuring that someone feels heard and understood, even if you're only interacting with them for like 5 minutes.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And they even have a whole section about dealing with difficult patients.
Oh, interesting.
Right, like someone who's angry, someone who's distrustful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's all about de-escalating that situation,
Right.
finding that common ground, and ultimately building enough trust so you can do your job effectively.
Wow, I never even thought about that angle of it, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on you as a tester to get accurate information, and that starts by building rapport.
It does.
Okay, so we've got active listening down. What's next?
So the next one they dive into is critical thinking, which is becoming increasingly important,
Okay.
not just in healthcare,
Yeah.
but, across all industries.
Absolutely.
And it's more than just common sense, right? It's
Yeah.
about analyzing information, spotting inconsistencies, being able to connect the dots. So imagine you're a tester, right? You notice that a patient's symptoms don't quite match up with their recent travel history, or maybe their body language contradicts what they're telling you. A critical thinker picks up on those subtle clues and knows when to maybe dig a little deeper.
It's almost like detective work in a way.
It is, and that's something the guide actually emphasizes.
Interesting.
That ability to kind of think on your feet,
Yeah.
assess the situation in front of you, make those judgment calls often based on incomplete information,
Yeah.
which is a skill, again, that's valuable everywhere, but especially healthcare where those details really matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it really makes you realize how much is going on behind the scenes of what we think is a pretty straightforward job.
Right.
Okay, so we have active listening, critical thinking. What's that third skill?
Okay, so this one might not be as obvious,
Oh,
but they
fine.
place a lot of emphasis on computers and electronics.
Really?
Yeah, they actually found that 62% of the job postings they looked at specifically mentioned that skill set. And it's not just, knowing how to use a computer, which is pretty much a given these days, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about when we say those kinds of tech skills?
So it's everything from, being able to manage those electronic health records, inputting data accurately,
Sure.
but then also troubleshooting those software glitches, adapting to new testing technologies as they come out.
So we're not talking about, like, just knowing how to check your email here.
Right.
This is, like, next level.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Think about it. New testing kits are always being developed. Software updates are constantly rolling out.
Right.
And you've got to be able to adapt to those quickly, troubleshoot problems on the fly, and make sure everything's running smoothly.
Right, right.
The guide even mentioned like some testers using data analysis software to track trends and identify potential outbreaks early on.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, like, really impressive.
It's pretty amazing.
It makes sense, though, because it's constantly evolving, it seems like. Which makes sense because it's such a quickly changing field in itself.
It really is, yeah. And that's something that RoleCatcher does really well is they map out, some potential career paths for these COVID testers, recognizing that, hey, this isn't just a temporary gig. This could be a springboard to a whole bunch of other opportunities.
Okay, so tell me more. What kind of career progression are we talking about?
Okay, so they outline 4 distinct stages. So it starts with a COVID tester assistant. And that's where you're really learning the ropes, assisting with those testing procedures. You're getting comfortable with the technology, mastering those communication skills we talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
So that entry level, building that foundation.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, got it. So what's next?
So from there, you move up to a full-fledged COVID tester,
Okay.
working more independently. You're managing your own workload, maybe even mentoring those new assistants coming in.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just your own tasks, but you're also starting to guide and train others,
Exactly.
which, those are great leadership skills to be developing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
And then as you gain that experience, you become more of an expert. You could become a senior COVID tester. And this is where you're taking on even more responsibility, overseeing teams of testers, analyzing data to make recommendations about testing protocols.
Wow.
Maybe even collaborating with healthcare professionals on like broader public health initiatives.
That is a far cry from, like, swabbing noses.
Oh, yeah,
Right? That's amazing.
But it just highlights like the potential growth within this field. You're no longer just administering tests, you're actually shaping the way that testing is integrated into like the healthcare system.
Okay, I'm really invested. What's at the very, very top, like the top?
Okay, so for those who, are really passionate about this, they have a knack for leadership. The guide points to that COVID testing supervisor role. That's like
league.
the big leagues, exactly.
Yeah.
Think, multi-site management, budget oversight, developing testing strategies, ensuring compliance with all the regulations. It's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
High-level position with a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
but also a ton of potential for impact.
That's really, really amazing.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, like, how this role that seems so specific to the pandemic
Yeah.
can actually, like, lead to a long-term fulfilling career path.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the question on everyone's mind is, what happens when COVID is no longer the hot topic, the thing that's on everyone's mind?
Yeah.
Are these skills transferable?
That's the beauty of it. They absolutely are.
Okay, good.
And this is where I think RoleCatcher really shines, is they don't just leave you hanging with a bunch of skills and nowhere to go.
I was just going to ask about that. So they actually help you, like, connect the dots between what you might have learned and...
They do, yeah.
Okay, great.
They do, and they actually have a whole section about those transferable skills and what they call adjacent careers,
Okay.
which I found super, super helpful.
Yeah.
And they make a really good point, which is that the skills that you've honed, in this role, the communication, the critical thinking, the tech savviness, being adaptable, those are in high demand everywhere.
So it's not about being, like, stuck in this one specific niche.
Right.
It's about looking at all the things you could do.
Exactly. And the guide even gets into some specific career paths that you might not think of right away.
Yeah.
Like they highlight medical assistant roles,
Okay.
which when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. You've got the clinical experience, those patient interaction skills, you're comfortable with the technology, all really valuable in a medical office.
It really is, like you said, a springboard.
Yeah.
What other kinds of things are listed?
Another one that jumped out was biomedical scientist. Now, that might require, some more education depending on what your background is.
Sure.
But the guide makes the point that experience as a COVID tester, that puts you way ahead.
Yeah.
You've been on the front lines of testing. You understand those procedures. You've been analyzing data that's huge in a field that's all about, developing and improving those diagnostic tools.
It really is amazing to think about how this one role can kind of unlock all these other doors.
Yeah.
But it also feels, I'm not going to lie, a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, where do you even start? How do you even begin to connect the dots and figure out what's right for you?
Well, and that's where I think RoleCatcher goes from being really interesting to incredibly useful.
Okay.
You know, we were talking about those platform features. It's
Right.
not just giving you info.
Right.
It's about actually giving you the tools to do something with it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's like that friend who doesn't just say, go for it. They're like, okay, but here's how you actually do that.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. So let's say you're interested in that medical assistant path.
Okay.
You can upload your resume to RoleCatcher. Their AI tools analyze it up against actual job descriptions out there.
Oh, wow.
And it'll show you, are there any skills gaps?
Oh, interesting.
So no more wondering, like, am I good enough for this?
Right. It's like, it just tells you.
It'll tell you.
Okay, very cool. I like that.
And it gets even better. It'll actually suggest courses or certifications you could take to, you know, fill those gaps and make your application really strong.
So it's like having, like, a personalized career coach
Totally.
in your pocket.
Yes. Amazing.
And then, you know, the cherry on top, they even have this feature that helps you prep for interviews.
Okay.
And it gives you practice questions for specific roles.
Wow.
Like if you want to be a medical assistant, if you want to be a biomedical scientist,
So they really do take you from A to Z.
they do.
I love that. I really do love how RoleCatcher doesn't just like present the information. It really empowers you to use it.
Yeah.
As so much for COVID tester being a dead-end job, huh?
Right. It's amazing what you learn.
Mhm.
It really is. This deep dive has been so interesting.
It has.
And I think it really shows that sometimes those unexpected roles are the ones that can actually lead to the most fulfilling careers.
Absolutely.
It's about perspective,
It
you know?
really is, yeah.
What seemed like this very niche thing during this global crisis actually have all these skills that people want and need,
Yeah.
and across industries, not even just this one little area.
Yeah, it reminds us that, you know, the future is about being adaptable and being willing to keep learning.
Absolutely. And being able to, like, recognize those transferable skills.
Exactly.
So the next time you're scrolling through job postings and you see a title and you're like, ugh, no thank you.
Yeah.
Remember this conversation.
Yes.
Do a little digging, right?
Your research.
You never know what you're going to find.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is a wrap on today's deep dive.
Awesome.
A huge thank you to RoleCatcher for their super interesting career guide. And of course, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.